Let's talk about it then. Couple weeks out, you've got Big Gay Brunch in Tampa coming up. You've had some fantastic card announcements, everything that's going into it. Is there anything particular though that stands out that you're like, this is what I'm most hype about? This is what the people in the stands are gonna, this is what's putting an ass every 12 inches.
Yeah, the first thing that jumps to mind is Billy Dixon versus Maid Kira, because Akira's like over with Big Japan right now doing bloody death matches, showing up on MLW doing. I just saw him get a glass pane dumped on him on MLW, and then come to find out there's this alternate personality that Akira has, as a beautiful kawaii maid. And I sort of reached out and was like, is this something you would wrestle in? Because I understand, like, all right, one thing's an internet thing. I don't know if you want this to be on your wrestling record. And, Akira is probably pansexual, has come really far and, publicly acknowledging that. And now I'm giving you a chance to come in and go like, okay, now I need you to show that Maid Kira is just as tough as Akira. And I've got Billy Dixon coming in, who has been a part of some of the wildest, bloodiest, craziest matches. Just had a crazy match, in Chicago with Sawyer Wreck. Was put, through the testing stand. If you look back at all the Billy Dixon matches, and now, it looks like a circus oddity from the outside. But I think once people are in this match, once the sort of enigma of the entrances of these two, showing off their personalities comes through, we're going to see an all-out war. And I think I'm like really excited to kind of subvert everybody's expectations on what this Maid Kira appearance is going to look like, because I think it's going to be crazy.
So when you're putting a show together and you got to wear a promoter's hat versus your wrestler's hat or your streamer's hat or any of the other hats that Evie wears daily, dealing in wrestling, you've got to herd some personalities in, man. What's it like when you're herding all the cats? I've been in indie shows and I've seen the group messages and it's like they go crazy sometimes. What's it like for you putting your promoter hat on, herding all these personalities in, and getting a show like the Big Gay Brunch off the ground?
It can be wild because obviously, like you said, like, okay, they're all LGBTQ superstars. This is such a varied, wide cast of a net that you have over people. This is such a very wild, different group of people. And for me, you say promoter hat. And when I think of a promoter, one of the biggest problems in wrestling and one of the problems that I've been knocking my head at right now is not every promoter in wrestling right now is actually trying to run a business. There's a lot of people who are big fans of wrestling who would like to say they book someone so they can seem cool, I guess, down the line. They don't mind losing $4,000 or $5,000, just bringing someone in who's not going to sell them any tickets. And so for me, it's about taking people that are already established and putting them in the right roles. But then I think as a promoter, it's also putting people in roles that are going to highlight them to the best of their ability and saying, okay, if I want to have this person here, where have I seen them before? What have I seen them do well? And what can I see them do even more of? And so giving those directions that aren't completely restrictive, but are sort of like, hey, here's something I really like about you, or here's a character trait that I don't know if you even know that is coming off about you that I think you should highlight. And then getting to put them in the matches where you can show that off. And then also being like, hey, those cool things you do, you got to guarantee you do those cool things for me. I think there's a level of trust now that makes it easier. Obviously, I used to be more hesitant on doing seminars, on giving advice, because for me, I was like, well, it works for EFFY. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone, but there are some universal truths to entertainment. And so to now have people who I wrestle nothing like, that I have a character nothing like, and I can look at them and have them listen to me and go, okay, I see what EFFY does, or I see an EFFY match. I know he's not having the same match as me, but I trust him as a performer who's done and seen a lot of things, that this is going to work, even if it sounds absurd to me, or even if it sounds crazy to me. And then, I did also learn that gays aren't always the most punctual in the world. And so if I'm stressing out about whether or not somebody's there yet, or whether something's ready to go, one of these shows, no shade to her, I love her, she's the most wonderful person in the world, Pollo Del Mar, I could not find her. This was in Dallas, and I'm going, where is this girl? She's got to open the show. 3 minutes before, she walks in full drag and goes, where's my microphone? I know what I'm doing. And it was sort of like, I could have beat myself up all morning going like, will she not? But instead I was like, let me focus on what I have here. Let me just like focus on what's around me. I have a match with Pimpinella Escarlata. She speaks zero English. I need to figure out how I'm going to get this done. And I have, 8 or 9 other matches that I'm worried about getting done. Let me just worry about this, and I'm sure she'll be fine. She's an adult. And the more I've just sort of like not focus on these minutia details, the better it has been. And luckily, like having that trust built in now, having people see, okay, this is going to sound weird or stupid or dumb, telling Jimmy Lloyd to put on a baby Bob costume because it's going to make sense. And then having, a match where we had 4 people that couldn't make the last show because of injury, because of COVID, because of all these things, family issues. And you go, all right, well, I can either make a big deal of this or I can make the show as good as I can. And because of that, we got to put a lot of people on the show who wouldn't originally have been on there, got to highlight a lot of talent, and seeing how dead serious Ron Bass Jr. and Perro were in their Hoss fight before in this twink gauntlet, as we call it, to then having Baby Bob come out and roll Perro up after a John Cena comeback, to have both of those moments exist and have performers who trust you and you go, it's going to work. It will land just as good seriously as it does when the comedic timing hits. It's nice to know that, like, yes, what I say to you doesn't sound correct as of wrestling 20 years ago, but I promise it will work. And our audiences are just as understanding too. And they're there to be entertained. They're ready to be shocked. They want these wild moments. And I think, like, the performers coming in know, like, all right, well, put your money where your mouth is, Effie. Let's see it work. And once it does, there's endless possibilities of what I can convince people to do.
So, AWOL right here, just coming off something you just said, talk about evolutions in the sport. People say you can't grade Tom Grady against, Joe Montana's and stuff because the sport has evolved from the 70s to 2000s. Do you think wrestling has evolved from the 70s and 80s and the territory days to where we're at in 2023 with your GCWs and your JCWs and, everything that's going on the indies? Have we evolved to that point with wrestling now, where it's the same sport, but it's not the same sport?
I am in this weird mind space that not a lot of my fellow performers agree with me on, where, I noticed when shows were starting to pick back up, when people were lifting mass restrictions, when things like this were happening, that the shows that were showing the most growth featured a lot of people coming in who weren't necessarily following all of us on Twitter. They weren't necessarily obsessed with pro wrestling. They weren't listening to The Observer. They were coming in to have a few beers, to have a night out on the town. They wanted something crazy in front of them. We're all so used to just having to watch stuff on TV, watch stuff on TikTok. It's one of the last wild, crazy, unpredictable things that happens in front of you. And so, wrestling has changed a lot, but I also think we have tightened, the restraints on what it means to be a wrestling fan, to the point where a lot of people are kind of turning away from it because it feels like a lot of work to be a wrestling fan. It feels like to be validated in wrestling fandom, you really have to know everything or watch everything. And so I get a lot of people who are coming to our shows who are saying, this is my first live wrestling show. I've never watched wrestling before. I didn't know I felt safe and comfortable in wrestling. And so what I'm trying to do now is teach people, like, listen, we have these big egos about our characters. Oh, I'm EFFY. I'm a worldwide phenomenon. But if we could tail that back and just be just as excited that this drunk mom who paid just as much as the guy who's going to write up reviews on the show said, oh, I love seeing daddy when daddy comes, that doesn't offend me anymore. I'm not mad if you're not obsessed with me. I'm not mad if you don't necessarily want to wait at the merch table to meet me. I'm happy people are showing up and choosing us as their form of entertainment when there's so much competition on the table, instead of worrying about, well, if you're going to really understand this feud, you need to understand back at this company what happened here, and this happened long ago, and they used to be friends in this and that. I want to present shows that are going to reward fans who've been around, but I want to present shows that aren't going to require you to have so much back knowledge and so much information that the internet has now presented us with, that it's going to be unenjoyable for you if you don't know what's going on. And I hope the rest of wrestling sees, like, I've even heard AEW say, well, we're worried about providing a show for our fans that like us already. We're not worried about making new fans. Wrestling fans, they're only going to be wrestling fans. You can't force somebody to be a wrestling fan, which is true. But I also think it's an art form that if we took ourselves a little less seriously, if we didn't gatekeep so much on fans who are coming in, if we didn't require so much knowledge or invalidate so many people who are coming in who maybe don't know Adam Cole's entire history or don't know, MJF's full backstory, and just were able to take in the show as it was happening and weren't requiring necessarily, well, you haven't watched 6 months of YouTube, so you really can't appreciate this. And I don't think you really know about these people. Just having a good time and choosing us as their entertainment, they should feel just as rewarded. And so, yes, wrestling has advanced a lot, but we also have to kind of peel ourselves back. There's a weird middle ground between, we used to be a carnival trick to try to trick people out of their money, and now we are an art form that is measured and studied, with full think pieces on a match, and we have star ratings on everything. Neither one of those positions is necessarily wrong, but there is a middle ground where we can respond to the performances. We can have certain feelings about them. We can watch them with a critical eye, but we can't also forget, like, this is still a night on the town. We're providing entertainment for people. Does the rock critic have as much fun at the show as the kid in the mosh pit? I don't know, but they both had to pay to get in, because I'm not listing any critics to get in. If they want to criticize, they can come pay for a ticket.